Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Louise. Here we are for two more chapters of I Would Meet You Anywhere by Susan Kiyo Ito. Such a good book.
Oh, it's such a good book. We're doing one, the chapters are totaled. And what's the next one?
And
Lucky. How could I forget that?
lucky. Yeah.
I'm going to get
Which,
another dog with Gracie and call it Lucky.
because the dog will be lucky because you adopted it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, those adopters.
I know.
Well,
Oh,
total, this book is just I feel totaled when I read it. I'm like, wow. So just right out of the gate, for a few years, my birth mother and I were almost friends.
and and then she jumps down and said she'd accepted the fact that she had half siblings who didn't know she existed, one who shared her original name. I just still think about that.
I do too. I
Um,
do think about it myself. It's like, um, and just her writing, like she's in a young voice, talking about it after college. She moved to California, was outside the San Francisco area. Yumi could get down and see her, and it was like it was the best of times. Like it's
and that, but
how she
still,
sets it up. Mhm.
even though, she's seeing Yumi and they're, almost friends, so to speak. Yumi's still really cagey with her, won't talk about
AG.
the kids, so it's a limited relationship on Yumi's terms.
It
The
really isn't.
entire thing is on Yumi's terms.
Yeah, she says it made me, this whole relationship, it makes me acutely aware of the power she holds,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the caginess, and just even what was the other thing you were talking about earlier, that, oh, it's like when we were discussing this weekend, you're having an affair. She's
Right.
literally having an affair with her mother because that's why it's so fun too. Because they cuddle under a blanket and go to food and watch a movie and
And doing all these things that,
together.
she talks a lot about, like the certain restaurants. Well, my adoptive parents would never go to this restaurant or,
Yeah.
and it just being having to be in a position of the comparing, and
Comparing, and she's so exciting. Yumi's so exciting and always looks
mm-hmm.
so put together. And it is like an affair though. Like she waits on the doorstep and doesn't really tell her when she's arriving. It
And
makes me want to read that book, An Affair with My Mother.
uh-huh, yes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so the whole total is just it's just so what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, l- just this hole inside that only that person can fill and yet they can't.
They can't even fill it. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know that it ever gets filled, right?
And she wants to ask about, everything is off limits. So it's just
Yeah.
once, being that eh, her controlling her life, that
Yeah, there was something where I'm not finding it, but she wants to ask her why they're asking questions like, and who's my birth father? But she
right.
doesn't do it because she knows that will ruin the moment,
Mm-hmm.
ruin the time.
So you're
And
always kind of on tenterhooks in that
hmm
scenario of not ever really being safe to be yourself, to ask any questions, to know the to know your own life.
yeah, to know your own life. Just I mean, and she knows the father. That's what's so crazy. She hasn't offered that information to me. It's
I
like they
know.
they keep in touch. And then the reason it's called totaled is because she gets in a big car accident the day after
Yes.
Yumi is has a hangout with her. And then Yumi comes over and is very motherly and
Which is
loving to
all, and then
her.
she had such complicated feelings because I understood that, the
Hmm.
sentimentality around that car because her dad had gotten her the car and,
Yep, me too.
and I think another piece of maybe moving a little bit further apart and it was very
Yeah, she
touching.
said, my daddy got me that car. I actually still drive my father's car after like his 2007 Lexus, and I'm attached to it. There's when it goes, it's another piece of what you let go.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and Yumi's comforting her. What was the closing line of that? That was pretty good.
If I could have had this before, I would have driven myself into oncoming traffic years ago.
Exactly. I knew you were going to find that right away too. I'm like, if I could have had this love from Yumi where she cuddles me after and
I would have
I'm
slammed myself into a tree.
that's what I don't think, after being with, all these adoptees when we were in New York, it's just unless you're adopted, you don't get it, right?
Right.
That's just a room full of people who get that. It's just so I'm sure other people in the world get it for other reasons, but it's just such a thing. So
I
then we
mean, I
go
don't,
into,
this particular thing you can't
yeah,
get unless you were adopted. It's
you
just,
just can't.
you just can't.
No. Well, so lucky. There's that word. This is an interesting chapter. I was
This is
surprised
an
by this
interesting
chapter.
chapter about the
Mm.
relationship.
Hmm.
Yeah. Susan, sees a flyer for a play, uh, about a birth mother who's given up her child
Yeah.
and calls her friend and asks him to go. And he can't go, but he thrusts his roommate upon her. And we end up finding out it's because the
Yeah.
roommate is a birth father, which was so interesting.
Which was so interesting. And she said, here's a father who wants to know his child was the rights were taken from him. The baby was given up for adoption, and he's like very traumatized by the whole thing.
Right. So to him, here's
Uh,
obviously their attraction
right
was
away.
was built on other things, it,
Yeah. It was like their
kind
loss
of
was like,
a doomed relationship, right? I would have done the same thing
me
as
too.
she went back then, like, oh my
Immediately.
gosh, and gotten enmeshed and codependent and
Yeah.
all that stuff where you just confusing the feelings with
And
the
they
situation,
instantly
I guess.
have this thing, but they don't introduce each other to their friends. They know they keep holding back. They both have their hold back issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then she gets pregnant.
Which,
And
I mean, so for the guy, this
yeah,
is the second
right.
situation scenario in which he got women pregnant.
So
And
here's an adoptee pregnant before marriage with all her complicated feelings with abortion that's allowed to be had at this now we're in a different era
mm-hmm.
with a guy who now doesn't want to go through this twice. They're not going to get married, stay together. I mean, this surprised me. This is actually it was always my fear. So it's like, whoa, she had to deal with some big stuff. And then when she called Yumi, she did call Yumi about it.
And Yumi was really compassionate and understanding,
Yeah.
which I guess was the person she needed to talk to. But also so odd.
Odd. And then Yumi, the one comment, what did she say? If I
Oh, that
didn't
she
have
would
that
if
choice,
she'd had that option available, she would have taken it, which, of course she
right.
didn't, she
Mean
wasn't
it.
connecting and she didn't, but how painful to have to hear that.
It's very painful. And that brings up the whole subject with adoptees, like when we're used in that whole thing
Hmm.
with abortion. It's like, okay, wait, good, bad, or the ugly. It's good she has the right to choose, honestly. And, but it's weird to hear that from your birth mother.
Right.
Her choice would have been different. But of course it
And
was. Look at the pain it threw Yumi into. I mean, this
And
is
as Susan said, uh, there's nothing to miss because had I not been born, there wouldn't be a life to
right.
miss. So, it's not even, it's a moot point, right? To say, well, when people do say to
I
adoptees,
hate
well,
that.
aren't you glad you weren't aborted? No, not necessarily. I
Yeah.
wouldn't know I wouldn't have been here to know differently. So, um,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I did like how she and Paul,
Yeah.
talked, the night before the abortion, talked through
Yeah.
it. They were both devastated. I mean, it's just all those feelings mixed in. And
They went through it together. I liked he stayed with her through it, held her hand through it. I mean, he's a good guy. It
he was
just,
able to get past his own
yeah.
trauma,
Yeah.
and do that.
Because
Yeah.
that's not the case for so many women, right? So
Hmm.
shout out to Paul, whoever you are out there. Um, I know it made me sad. I was surprised by the turn because she is so young and sweet in her head,
I mean,
Susan,
at
at
this
this
point, she's in her
age.
20s, right?
Yeah, but
Like,
she's there's
yeah.
something so innocent about her. Like I have to talk to her in person. I can't handle it. I have so many questions, Susan.
Yes. Susan, we'll be talking to you soon about all this. And we just love the book so much.
We love the book.
Yeah, so that was that chapter. And next week we will be going to I Would Meet You in a Hospital and Long Lost Daughter. So,
Yeah.
yes.
It's hard not to blow through this.
It really is hard not to blow through this.
When we traveled, I didn't bring it with me because I was like, nope, I'm not gonna, be tempted. So
No, I know, me too. And because then I would be rereading anyway to refresh my memory.
yeah, I know my memory.
I have a separate book I'm reading, which is an escapist fiction. So that's helpful.
It is helpful. Well, we have Lorraine coming, so I'm excited about that. She's
Yeah,
really,
she's great. Yes.
she is.
So I guess I will see you in a minute, Louise.
I'll see you in a minute, Sarah.